The story you are about to hear represents a missing piece in the puzzle of modern history. Without this knowledge, many contemporary events are simply beyond understanding. You are about to hear a man tell you that the major tax-exempt foundations of this land, since at least 1945, have been operating to promote a hidden agenda. And that agenda has nothing to do with the surface appearance of charity, good works, or philanthropy. This man will tell you that the real objectives include the creation of a worldwide collectivist state, including the Soviet Union, which is to be ruled from behind the scenes by those same interests which now control the tax-exempt foundations. The man who tells this story is none other than Mr. Norman Dodd, who in 1954 was the staff director of the Congressional Special Committee to investigate tax-exempt foundations, sometimes referred to as the Reese Committee, in recognition of its chairman, Congressman Carroll Reese. The interview you're about to see was conducted by me in 1982.
At that time, their interest shifts over to preventing what they call a reversion of life in the United States to what it was prior to 1914, when World War I broke out. And they arrive at that point, they come to the conclusion that to prevent a reversion, we must control education in the United States. And they realize that that's a pretty big task. So to them, it is too big for them alone, so they approach the Rockefeller Foundation with the suggestion that that portion of education which could be considered domestic be handled by the Rockefeller Foundation, and that portion which is international should be handled by the endowment. And they then decide that the key to the success of these two operations lay in an alteration in the teaching of American history. So they approach 4 of the then most prominent teachers of American history in the country, people like Charles and Mary Bird, and their suggestion to them is, will they alter the manner in which they present this subject, and they get turned down flat. So they then decide that it is necessary for them to do, as they say, build our own stable of historians. And then they approach the Guggenheim Foundation, which specializes in fellowships, and say, when we find young men in the process of studying for doctorates in the field of American history, and we feel that they are the right caliber, will you grant them fellowships on our say-so? And the answer is yes. So under that condition, eventually they assembled 20. And they take this 20 potential teachers of American history to London, and there they're briefed into what is expected of them when, as and if they secure appointments in keeping with the doctorates they will have earned. And that group of 20 historians ultimately becomes the nucleus of the American Historical Association.
Those who tell the stories rule society. Plato. I'm John Rose. Start off this video with that great Norman Dodd interview, where he talks about how the powers that be changed their interest to prevent a revisionism of the good old days. Kind of what's happening right now, isn't it? The new normal, the great reset. Got to control those history books to make sure you guys don't wake up and realize we live on an abundant planet. Best kept secret on this planet is we live on an abundant planet, and if we had our act together, simply corrected 5 main mistakes, especially that first one, we wouldn't have to spend very much of the day at all and then end up enjoying most of our life. The vast majority of our life would be pleasurely. We'd be making everything better. Mainly because we weren't making that first of those 5 main mistakes. That's how devastating that first mistake is. It's how powerful it is if we correct it. That first mistake is what changed our mentality. The reason why we're in trouble right now is our collective mentality. There's only one way to change our collective mentality, that's to change our individual mentality. And there's really only one way to do that, and that is to correct all 5 of those mistakes so we can bump up those biophotons and flush out that serpent that's in our belly. Those are 2 huge contributing factors, folks, that create this dark side to our behavior. And then it's the darkest of the darkest of us, or the sickest of the sickest of us, who tell us all the stories. Where are we hearing our stories from? Are you still watching the news? Are you unaware who owns the media? They're telling us stories. Think about it, folks. Everywhere we're hearing stories told, there's a small group of people who are controlling those stories. Hollywood, the media, the television shows, the movies we watch, even the books we have access to in our library. Knowledge is being controlled so we don't wake up and realize this is an abundant planet. Got to control those history books, as Norman Dodd pointed out. The powers that be, the Rockefeller Foundation, will control domestically. Carnegie Endowment, you guys control internationally. Control those historians so people don't realize how great things were in the past. And they'll accept the new normal, the Great Reset. We're out to save you guys, remember? The urge to save humanity is almost always only a false face for the urge to rule it. H.L. Mencken. These guys understood what was going on, that when these tyrants come along, they first come out and say, we're going to protect you. Every time we hear one of those stories where we need protection, we better stop and think as to whether or not we want to comply with this or consider civil disobedience instead. And that's hard for the average person to do if they are only getting their stories from one source and they're oblivious to the fact that these stories are manipulated so that we'll have certain beliefs in our brain. One of those is that belief in scarcity, the illusion of scarcity, that we don't understand we live on an abundant planet. The other belief has to do with the cause of disease. As long as we believe things are outside of our control, someone can scare us, tell us a story, and we'll need their protection. That's why we got to wake up and realize there's the ultimate tool of control, our health, and the absolute tool of control, the money they use to control us, that they can then use to own and control all those major sectors of human endeavor that are telling us stories. Our educational systems. Did you guys listen to the Norman Dodd interview at the beginning of this video? Did you hear what he said? And did you see what Griffin said about this man? He knew there is a small group of people trying to usher in a one-world collectivist state. And there's only one way to do that. Got to create some sort of global problem. Man-made global warming. Pandemic, global pandemic. Problem, reaction, solution. I did a video specifically on that. Put a link down below. And of course, what's the reaction that they want from us? It's the fear. That's what allows them to deal with the solution. We're your protectors. We've got the solution for you. No, you don't. You've pulled that prank on us ever since the last century or so, when you came up with these poisons to claim that would protect us. They've done nothing but harm us. And yet you're going to keep doing it, simply because you're telling the stories. Well, we got to start telling better stories than theirs. Or we got to get our story out. We got a much better story than theirs. It gets us out of this mess. It helps us correct these 5 main mistakes so that we can be the best that we can be. especially that very first mistake we've made that completely alters our food, which then completely alters us and gives us the wrong mentality. That's why we got to realize how profound that effect is. It's the worst negative effect that's ever happened to us. Because if we don't address the wrong mentality, we're doing too much stuff downstream. We got to go upstream, find the knowledge we need that changed our mentality when we stopped applying it. And when we find the knowledge, we got to apply it so we don't have what we got now. It's very simple, folks. 5 main mistakes have to do with 5 things we mastered. And we made bad applications to them. We applied them to our food. Take a solid food vacation. I have a seminar for you guys, if you've never been to my channel before, on how to take a solid food vacation. Correct these 5 main mistakes on a temporary basis so you can see what you're missing. Otherwise, if I tell you what those mistakes are now, some of y'all are going to go running and screaming and say, I don't want to entertain that idea. I understand. That's why I say, you got to test an idea as time has come. You got to see what you're missing. You have to have a brand new reference. That will help you understand that life is an illusion. So for you seekers out there for enlightenment, there's only one way to become enlightened. It's to dissolve the illusions. Realize the lies and the stories we've been told that deal with scarcity and disease, and realize that we're sick. It's us. We're the only ones who can solve that problem. That's why this is the hero's journey. Only heroes can solve problems, and our problems are self-inflicted. So we got to realize the role we play. And understanding that aspect of us. And when that happens, that changes our mentality, and we go from the exchange mentality we have now to a gift mentality, where we understand this very simple concept of reciprocal altruism, where the more we give, the more we receive. Right now, we can't even wrap our brain around that. It doesn't even make sense because no one else is doing it. But when everyone does it, that's what changes. And yes, that's down the road quite a bit. Got to reach that tipping point first. We got to get enough of you guys out there, take a solid food vacation to wake the rest of us up. Remember, that's going to correct 5 main mistakes on a temporary basis, so you can see what you're missing. Trust me, you're not in a position, if you haven't done this yet, to even entertain the idea that you should not make those mistakes. Because you love them. You're under a spell. That's what Plato said. Whatever deceives men seems to produce a magical enchantment. We're under the hunger spell, folks. Shouldn't have an all-gone feeling down here in our belly. That's a withdrawal symptom. It's a morbid sensation. True hunger is a water in the throat. And you can experience that again by taking a solid food vacation. That's why if we don't do this, we're always going to struggle. It's going to be hard to correct those 5 main mistakes just right off the bat. And I've known people to do it. If you got enough motivation, you can do it. If you're deathly ill, you can do it. And why would you want to? Because when you correct those mistakes, you're going to be getting rid of the main causes of disease. Not all of them, because food's not a panacea. I explain that in much more detail in my video, What is the Healthiest Diet for Humans? I also explain the disease process in much more detail and disease mysteries revealed. I'll put links down below to those videos. And I always have a link to my playlist. I have 32 videos currently in my playlist to take a solid food vacation. Again, this is only something we do on a temporary basis. And if you need motivation, look in the description box and you'll find the Dr. Roby interview. Watch me on the Deborah Duncan Show with 6 of my students. People get rid of varicose veins, bunions, fibromyalgia, gout. They start winning every race. Powerful, powerful testimonies, folks. And I know how hard this is to believe. It almost sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? So read the comments on my YouTube video. Look at all these people all around the world doing this. And when you look into this and you realize, my gosh, look what happens when we take a solid food vacation, correct those 5 mistakes on a temporary basis. Most, if not all, of our illnesses and ill behaviors go away. But of course, part of that protocol is understanding that food is just one of 12 essential needs. We've got to satisfy all of those. And again, I explained that in more detail in What is Healthiest Diet for Humans? Air, water, food, sunshine, exercise, and sleep. We've got to satisfy all of those. to be the best that we can be. And if we're damaged, we might have some other needs. I explained that in that video also. So, those who tell the stories rule society. He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. Orwell. Pretty similar, isn't it? He who controls the past, that's the history books, controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past. The history books. This is possibly the most important piece of the puzzle. If you don't understand this piece of the puzzle, you're not going to be able to make any sense out of all these events that have been going on in the world for the last 100 years. You got to realize that what we've been told about most events have been wrong. For the simple reason that the people behind the curtain want those events to happen again. And they are happening again. And we can put an end to it because right now, more than ever, are so many people waking up and realizing this is not an emergency. We know it's not an emergency. We got you now. The only thing we need now is to figure out a little bit more about this disease process. All we need to know now is a little bit more about our species-specific diet and how important it is to be eating those biophotons. That's what we really need. So all you guys are out there that are waking up and realizing that what's going on, that this is just another lie. The media's lying to us, our officials are lying to us. You got to then say, well, how do we get out of this mess? How do we defeat those people? It's only one way to defeat those people. It's up to you. It's a bottom-up solution. We got to reach the tipping point. We got to spread the message about the solid food vacation and how that gets rid of the disease process. And that will give you a better understanding of the disease process once you do that, especially if you have a lot of illnesses, because those illnesses are going to go away, most of them. Because they're going to address both the toxicity issue and the deficiency issue for most problems. Obviously, you got to get your sunshine, which is why I'm out here in the middle of the day getting some sunshine. Of course, it's over 100 degrees out here in Texas. Anyway, we got to keep doing what we're doing, folks. We got to let everyone know that we're being told lies, that the history books are wrong, what we've been told about those 3 big events last century that killed so many people, the 2 wars and the pandemic, all that's wrong. We got to realize that if they're controlling what our historians understand, then they're also controlling what our doctors and our nutritionists understand. And since I've been studying this for over three decades, 30 years, I know what these guys are being taught. And I know it's not what I've learned, because I know what I've learned works. So that's the only thing we have to think about when it comes to this message. Don't even want to get into an argument or a discussion with these people, explaining their details. Who cares? You guys don't get results. We get results. And you can prove this to yourself. Take a solid food vacation and watch what happens. Within a week, the light bulb goes off over your head, because the average person is going to lose 7 to 10 pounds, women and men, in the first week, because they're flushing out that serpent that Victor Hugo referred to, that's in our intestines, which disrupts the equilibrium between our body and our soul, according to Victor Hugo. It's the mother of all crime and vice. The colon is king. It's a heavy burden. We got a bunch of bad stuff inside of us, folks, that's keeping us from being the best that we can be. And that's how you're going to defeat the powers that be, is get the masses to wake up, to realize, my gosh, my doctors don't know this, my nutritionists don't know this, what we were taught in history is wrong, what they're telling us now in the news is wrong. The powers that be don't care about us. It's all about controlling us. And as long as we're out of control, we're going to be vulnerable. That's why the ultimate solution is to bump up those biophotons, because that's what got us in trouble to begin with. I explain that in more detail in Satan's Secret Weapon. I talk about the Kyklo cycles, how governments go through cycles. I explain how democracy goes through 9 cycles. And it all started with aglocracy. That is when the mob became a problem. See, the mob always rules. Just the quality of the mob, it depends on whether or not we're in trouble or not. And that's why we're in trouble. The mob's a problem. That's what created a need for a government to begin with. I explained that in quite a few videos, but I had an 11-part video series called The Ultimate Solution. 11-part video series. Where I explain how we have 10 subsequent needs because we stopped eating biophotons and we stopped eating our species-specific diet. And the way to overcome those systems, the way to fix them is not to try to fix them, is to change the mentality that created the need to have them to begin with. I've given this a lot of thought, folks. I know there's a simple solution to this. We got to figure out how to get the people that are realizing this is not an emergency and get them to take the next step and take a solid food vacation. Because when they take a solid food vacation, once again, they're going to start getting a better idea of what the real cause of the disease is. Some of those guys will have cleansing reactions. What did I catch, a cold or a flu? Well, they're flu-like symptoms. We don't catch colds and flus as many people believe. They're body initiated. And they only happen if we've got a bunch of junk inside of us. That's why I love the solid food vacation. Within 1 week, as I mentioned, that light bulb goes off because you're seeing all this filth come out and you go, well, no wonder. I had stuff pouring out of my nose. No wonder I have all these other problems. Go the distance, you have that aha moment, and that's when it gets exciting. Because that's when you realize almost everything you've been taught about why we get sick and what we have to do to get healthy has been wrong. And you found that out because you've been suffering for decades, some of you out there. And you take that solid food vacation and you do all those other things you have to do. You start sleeping good, you start getting your sunshine and fresh air. Do all those positive things that I talk about in my videos to satisfy our needs. And you realize, my gosh, I'm a brand new person. I feel better now in my 60s than I did when I was in my 30s, and some of y'all even in your 20s. Some of your health has gone down so early in life, and it's sad. And it's never too late. You could have been suffering for 4 decades, crippling arthritis, and it can be gone if you simply clean out your body and start feeding it its species-specific diet. And make sure you're eating those biophotons. So what I would like for you guys to do in this video is keep sharing where you're at on this journey. Whether or not you're on a solid food vacation now or not, you can say, I've done one before. Remember, we want to help motivate people, give people a reason to take the first step, because that's always the hardest part on this journey. Most people don't have the ears to hear. They don't want to accept the fact that they've got some false knowledge. You got to admit, number one, you don't know. You got to be willing to at least try something you've never done before. That's the solid food vacation. Testing ideas time has come. I guarantee you, folks, when you do that, you're in for a treat.